So I just spent the night in hospital with chest pain. I've had chest pain for about a week. It started about a week after I got my second dose of Pfizer. I'm feeling okay. The pain's being managed with medication. And the doctors believe it's pericarditis, which is a very rare side effect of the Pfizer vaccine. It can be treated, which is the important thing. And really, I just wanted to film this message to say that even despite these side effects, I would get the vaccine again. For me, it's more important that we all protect ourselves and save lives, make the sacrifices that we need to for the greater good, then, and I think the benefits of that far outweigh any potential side effects, particularly given the side effects of COVID, the long-term impacts can be disastrous. So I implore everyone to get the vaccine. Some of us might have to take it on the chin, take some of the side effects on the chin.
Take it on the chin.
Most of which can.
Take pericarditis on the chin.
But they pale in comparison to COVID and to the risks of COVID. So let's do this. Stay strong, Sydney.
Let's do this.
We can get through this. We just have to do our part.
This makes me hold on. We're gonna walk through this in a second. I don't want to say this enrages me because I don't know whether or not to be enraged at this individual or just feel terrible for this individual. Part of me feels like there is literally, maybe not literally, someone holding a proverbial gun to this woman's head off camera saying, "You're in the hospital. We can't hide this, but you damn well better keep promoting this." Like, I don't know whether to feel sorry for her or to be angry at her or a little bit of A and a little bit of B. I would love to ask her how she feels now. I would love to ask her if this statement, this public service announcement in support of a medical procedure that just gave her pericarditis, inflammation of the muscle around the heart. I forget that myocarditis is inflammation of the muscle of the heart. Pericarditis is inflammation of the sac around the heart. I would like to ask her if this statement was made willingly with her consent, if she was pressured by her employers. For those of you who don't know, I should have backed this up a little bit. Let me just refresh, because whenever I go back, the woman who made this statement, Georgia B. Clark, senior communications advisor, legal aid, NSW, ex-journalist, Daily Telegraph, ARV, a journalist. I don't know if she was a journalist at the time or if she was an ex-journalist at the time. I want to know if this statement was made voluntarily, if there was overt pressure, or if she just felt, what's the word I'm looking for? Discreet pressure, social pressure. You're in the hospital for pericarditis. By the way, Winston, get on. Dog's got my mic cable wrapped around him. You're in the hospital for heart sac inflammation, pericarditis. It's treatable, though. You know what else is treatable? COVID. A young woman with chest pain for about a week, as if, heart inflammation, treat it. It's gone. No harm, no foul. Line yourself up for your next jab and wait for the punchline of this. Now, by the way, in fairness, this is over a year ago. Although even a year ago, I think people were starting to get wise to the fact that the jippy jab did not prevent transmission, in which case everything that follows in this public service announcement for a medical procedure which harmed her. I won't say it came close to ending her life, although a great many people, passed suddenly afterwards. It doesn't stop transmission. Whether or not it was known then, like it's known now, I think it was. Very rare. One in 5,000. 1 in 5,000. Very rare. You know what else can be treated? You know what else is pretty rare? Young people passing from the Rona. Despite the side effects. Now, this is where I don't know whether or not to feel bad or to feel angry. If this person now has suffered potentially irreversible, although it was treated, serious side effects, now urging others to go out and do it because she thinks it's for the greater good, whatever that possible greater good could be. Is this a case of brainwashed Stockholm syndrome? Is this a case of someone who actually believes this? Or is this a case of misery loves company? I took it on the chin. Now it's your turn to risk taking it on the chin. By the way, I would love to talk to her today to see if she feels the same way today that she did a year ago. But it doesn't prevent transmission. Does this statement still hold true? You want to sacrifice your own heart, you go ahead and do that. Oh yeah, just a wee bit of pericarditis. They can be. I suspect the long-term impacts of pericarditis can also be disastrous. Some of us might. Who the hell do you think you're talking for? I want to, like, some of us might have. That's a risk she's willing to take. Oh, really? August 2021, we knew enough. I even if I'm supposed to be angry with her, I still feel bad for her. That is pathological. It's like in a way, it's sort of like tattooing or the addiction to tattooing. I've discussed this with people. It generates a certain bit of pain when it's done. It releases endorphins. You feel like you've gotten through some pain and you have something to show for it. And it's sort of a rush. I appreciate that. And I appreciate that with no judgment. This pathological risk of harming yourself for no better. You don't even have a tattoo to show for it at the end of it. I mean, you get a hospital stay to show for it. This is like the thrill, the risk, virtue signaling so hard that you're willing to give yourself the risk of myocarditis, pericarditis, whatever other potential side effects you want. But it feels so good that just saying, I do it again, that releases the virtue endorphins that we all need. By the way, there is a bigger punchline to this. The same journalist, let me just see when this picture was from. Did I get the date on this? August 20th. I just saw my cardiologist. This is her cardiologist giving her this advice. And the inflammatory markers for the pericarditis are gone. So I'm well and truly on the mend. I hope you're right. I just know what other doctors have told me about the long-term effects of myocarditis and pericarditis. I still have to lay low with exercise, just minor things, because I can't stress my heart. Just that thing in the center of my body that controls pretty much everything else. I still have to lay low and exercise and monitor for relapse, but I'm feeling better. He also says I should be okay to get a booster shot. I'd like to know the name of that cardiologist, so that I can make sure never to see that person, never to have a loved one go to visit that cardiologist. He says, lay low for a while. You'll get over it. Don't exercise, though. Don't want to stress your heart after this bout of pericarditis. But you should be good for the booster of the very same vaccine that gave you pericarditis in the first place. If that cardiologist told her that, and I would like to ask her this as well, that cardiologist should have his or her license revoked. Your heart doesn't control everything else. Your heart pumps blood so everything else continues to work. That's your brain controls everything. The center stem controls your nervous system. Your heart continues to allow everything else to function. I know, Steve, it was sort of, oh God. Now I'm going to get fact checked. Viva the medical hypochondriac wrongly suggests the heart does control everything. No circulating blood, nothing. No brain, no central nervous system, no heart automatically pumping blood. Although Mike the headless chicken, people, Mike the headless chicken had his head cut off. But it still left a portion of the brain that controlled the central nervous system. Its heart continued to beat, and it became a circus freak show for a little while, with its owner feeding it down the gullet with a pipette after it had healed. It had no head. Guys, look it up. Mike the headless chicken. So anyways, the thing is, I don't want to be too mean on that person. I don't know who she is, and I genuinely feel bad for her. I know who she is from a social media perspective. I would love to have an interview with her to ask all these questions. Was that a voluntary or coerced statement? Does she still feel the same way now? And has she had any long-term effects that she would be willing to disclose? I was being pedantic, Viva. I know, and as I know as well. Okay. Standard disclaimers. No medical advice whatsoever. No medical advice, no legal advice, no election fortification advice, although we're going to be talking about some serious election chicanery. It's Sunday. It's Sunday after the Tuesday of the midterms, and they're still counting ballots. And there's nothing abnormal about that, people. It's just the new democracy. Was a Jurassic Park worth the $109 it cost to take 2 kids? Looked like it. It was good. I'll close off the video with a little bit of that from Viva family. We went to Lion Country Safari, Drive Safari. It's in Florida. I don't know where it is. It's sort of like on the border of the Everglades, west of Okeechobee and a little south. It was $109.21 for one adult and 2 kids. Was it worth it? What else if you have them, if you have $100, what else are you going to do on a Saturday? And you build memories. Memories are invaluable. Is it worth doing twice? Maybe not. Thank you for the book tweet, Viva. I hope you enjoyed Unacceptable Fringe, who wrote the book. You know what? That's a good segue into this. Unacceptable Fringe, Derek Smith. You may know him from such fantastic parody books as The Prime Minister, How the Prime Minister Stole Freedom. He's written another one, and I don't know how he came up with this stroke of genius for the title. Are we seeing the same thing that I'm seeing right here? Okay, yeah, there we go. One face, two face, black face, blue face. I mean, it's genius. In the city of Ottawa, you've probably heard this before, but what you don't realize is we missed so much more. Who runs the country and affects your bills? Who holds the seats inside Parliament Hill? Join us for a tour as we will go places to show you all of the Prime Minister's faces. Trust us, they'll be honest. They'll have nothing to hide. We hope so, at least. So take a look inside. And I'm in this book, which is not the reason for which I'm publicizing it. Publicize the last one as well, but I'm in it. And I put the Amazon affiliate link in there. That means buy it off Amazon. I get some kickback from Bezos or something. I don't even know how it works, but figured if someone's going to buy something, buy it through an Amazon link. It's good stuff. Okay, let me close that up. So thank you for the book. No, Derek, thank you for writing. Amazing stuff. Ontario trying to bring back masks. Do we A, not wear them, B, wear the most obvious ineffectual mask ever? I cannot suggest or recommend people break the law or people, defy regulation to prove a point. It's not something I can recommend other people do. I think it's immoral, unethical to tell other people to go break the law when you're not the one who's going to have to live with the consequences. Oh boy. I don't know what I would do at this point in time. I mean, it's we're living through idiocracy. We're living through insanity as defined by Albert Einstein. Insanity is doing the same thing over and over, expecting different results. P.O. Rourke, 22, Rumble Rant, $10 Rumble Rant says, interview Ed Dowd about his research on sudden death syndrome. I will. We got a $10 P.O. Rourke says, interview. Oh, that's the same chat. I hope you didn't mean to do that twice. Mahoyo says, Viva, usually when someone says the greater good, it's never the greater good. That was a $5 Rumble Rant. And joining the Rumble, Angry Otter. Now, I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to get to the Rumble Rants throughout the stream. I will screen grab them and do what I did last week, a Locals exclusive read the next day. But just speaking of the insanity, and it's actual, hold on one second, I don't have the book. It's actual insanity. What's coming out of Canada? It's immoral insanity. This might be one of my subtlest and most amazing tweets ever. I'll get to it in a second. Here we go. The Globe and Mail. We've talked about it before, but Canada is now expanding euthanasia. It's now this sunset provision of the original euthanasia law is now being sunsetted to allow euthanasia of the mentally ill. Canada will allow assisted dying for mental illness starting in March. Has there been enough time to get it right? And it's my talking point. Mental illness in law vitiates consent. Depending on the type of illness, it can vitiate consent in contracts. That's why I said can. Not always. It can render someone not criminally responsible for their actions. Can, not always. Even someone who is mentally ill can still be criminally responsible under certain, if they knew at the time that what they were doing was wrong, if they had the requisite mens rea intent at the time. But it can. And now it's good enough for Justin Trudeau to allow them to consent to being euthanized by the state. This is the absolute state of Canada. Expanding euthanasia from what has already been, I say, an unconscionable expansion of euthanasia. 2021, 10,064 Canadians euthanized by the state, or euthanized having gotten the rubber stamp from the, not a rubber stamp, the stamp of approval from the state. And now they're expanding it even more. Just to put that into perspective, by my math, in 2021, just trying to put all the numbers together. By my math, in 2021, 17,000 Canadians died from COVID. That was enough to shut down the country, mask up children, compel the jibby jab. 17,000 in 2021. I think it was like the balance was in 2020 because there's been like 40 some odd thousand deaths of COVID since the beginning in Canada. 17,000 deaths from an illness to shut down the country while the government simultaneously authorizes euthanasia in over 10,000 people. Try to do the math on that. This is probably my subtlest, but I think my most powerful tweet. Do you know who else euthanized the mentally ill, Justin Trudeau? Yes, it's a Hitler reference. Look up Action 4, Acton 4. I forget exactly what the name of the program was. They called them Mercy back in the 30s. And every now and every people always say, you know who else like to do something totally innocuous in order to equate a political party or a political leader to Hitler? Like, oh, you know who else used to deny elections? Hitler. You know who else used to drink coffee? Hitler. Hey, Trump drinks coffee. Trump denied. There are stupid comparisons, and then there are actually meaningful ones. You know who else used to euthanize the mentally ill? And that's right. You got it right. Yeah, people are saying Operation T4. It was like Action. There was a German word for it. Action T4. Barnes will know. Maybe he'll help us with this. Barnes is in the backdrop, people. And just so everybody knows, if I look distracted or if I have to, what's the word? Suddenly put my mic and camera on mute. My wife is out of town for a week. I've got 2 kids and now a guest at the house. I hear everything. My daddy senses are tingling. I hear laughing. If I hear too much silence or crying, I might have to run into the other room. So for the next week, it's going to be me and the kids. So that's it. Barnes is the GOAT. Oh, here we go. Intelligentsia Action. So that's it. Just if I look or sound distracted or if I have to leave, we'll see. Okay, I'm bringing in the Barnes right now. And then in about 10 minutes, we're going to go exclusive on Rumble. The link is there, so get in on it, people. Robert, sir, how goes the battle?
Good.
Well, let's see. What do you have behind you? I think we've seen that book, and I wish I knew cigars enough to know what that was from the label. But book and cigar before we get started.
Oh, sure. This is a Arturo Fuente cigar. Very good non-Cuban cigar. And then the book is 1775, Good Year for Revolution by Kevin Phillips. Has written many great political books. He returned to writing about American history in the early 2000s when he grew exhausted with American politics, and for a period of time found that there was better respite in the past than there was in predicting the short-term future because of his dissatisfaction about where American political power had turned. So the apropos, given certain circumstances.
All right. And now, did you see that? Did you see the CanCon video about Dallas, Texas, getting votes after polls are closed? I don't think so, but I think we're going to talk about it tonight. Robert, I mean, look, we might not get through everything tonight, but you want to? Do we give an overview, or do we just start talking?
Yeah, no, we'll go through the list. The election contest and election cases that may be forthcoming. We'll see. We'll get to that a little bit later in the show. We have FTX. The FTX scandal has many implications, including, not limited to, the election as well. Judicial Watch uses FOIA to find biolabs in Ukraine. In fact, we're being supported by the U.S. government. Whether or not criminal defamation, seditious libel is still on the books and is still constitutional in America. Dave Portnoy's defamation case, what its status is. The Covington kids have a defamation petition pending before the Kentucky Supreme Court. Vindman, what happened to his case against Trump and Giuliani in the District of Columbia. A big Second Circuit vaccine mandate type case, not in the COVID vaccine context, but in the measles context. A lockdown lawsuit, what happened to it when it went to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. All the Fed informants that keep popping up in Oath Keeper cases. Can a judgment out of Chinese arbitration be enforced in the United States? The answer might be yes, might surprise some people. SCOTUS update, Trump taxes, identity theft, and whether or not any kind of, what is identity theft? Can it apply to things that aren't actually identity theft? Well, one court said yes. Supreme Court will decide whether that's ultimately right. The Fifth Amendment, when can you take it? Can you take it in a deposition and then not take it later, or not take it at the deposition and then take it later, as showed up in the Flint case? Big Second Amendment case out of New York with its new gun concealed carry law. What happened to it? Tyson Foods caught stealing from farmers. Shock, shock. Alexa problems at Amazon are showing up in a major case with them trying to delay discovery. And can you ban pit bulls? Can a city get away with that as a case that went up before the Eighth Circuit Court of Appeals? The Biden administration's attempt to force doctors to do gender transition treatment and completely obliterate Title IX and redefine it to serve gender identity purposes went into federal court today, or this past week, the America First Legal Center case. And then you have the what happens when a police chief shows up at the scene, promises a family that he's going to make sure that the person suffering mental illness within is taken care of and is not shot, and then goes in and shoots him. Does he still have immunity? We'll deal with that and a few scattering of other fun little cases in between.
Robert, let's start with the big one, because I was driving around with the kids today and they said, Dad, why are we listening to this crap on the car? Because I'm playing YouTube breakdowns of the FTX scandal. I don't think they understood anything of what they heard. But, and I know they didn't understand it. If I'm sitting there saying, holy crap, I know I don't understand Bitcoin. It's why I've never accepted an offer to endorse Bitcoin or do anything paid for Bitcoin. Let's tackle this, because there's probably much more to this than I can possibly understand. I understand the basics of the economics as to how this happened from an economic perspective, from a reality perspective, how this could have possibly happened. I'll do my best, Robert. There are two big, or the top three exchanges for Bitcoin, or for digital currency. One is, I forgot the name already. What's the biggest one? It's the one that bought Binance. The second is FTX. FTX basically looks like it issued a bunch of tokens, its own special tokens, which it valued itself, which it then sold to its second biggest shareholder, which is a related shareholder, to basically artificially inflate the books to make it look like they were liquid enough to be an exchange for Bitcoin. I don't know who the players are involved in this, but the bottom line of it is it was a total scam, fabricated equity out of thin air to falsify the books to make it look like they were liquid to actually carry on as an exchange. I'm gonna screw it up by being too simplistic, but one of the major shareholders sold hundreds of millions of dollars of his interest in the company. Binance then says we're going to issues a letter of intent to say we're going to buy out this company, and then revokes it or retracts it when they find out it's a house of cards. And now we're finding out that the guy behind it, what's his name? I know it ends in Freed, and I know his hair looks kind of like mine, which is already 2 strikes against me, is a big political donor, second biggest Democrat political donor, donates, apparently, I guess, hedges his bets and donates to GOP as well, and has filed for Chapter 11. And this is basically going to be the straw that broke the camel's back of bringing in government regulation of digital currencies. I know I missed a bunch there, but help us out, make sense of what's going on, and the hush-hush aspect to what might be going on behind the scenes with this individual who seems to be wickedly politically connected.
Yeah, I might do a whole separate hush-hush, which you can find at vivabarneslaw.locals.com. Hush-hushes are alternative narratives to the official narrative throughout of major events through history, and sometimes even predicting future ones. You can go back and watch our January 6th one that was done right after January 6th, and how many things are popping like that as we see the trials of the Oath Keepers and other cases. So this is a case that's got all kinds of components. So you got cryptocurrency, you got a guy who died in the Caribbean predicting that something was wrong in a certain way in the suspicious circumstances. You have allegation, you have unexplained sources of original investment income. You have prominent Democratic donors and Democratic PACs and Democratic leaders of the would-be crypto regulatory space at the Commodities and Futures Trading Commission, as well as the Securities Exchange Commission, the CFTC, and the SEC. You have Tom Brady and major actors and major personalities who have been involved in marketing and publicizing it, even a basketball NBA stadium in Miami, no less. You got Bahamas, you got Argentina, you got Dubai, you got Hong Kong. So you got a little bit of everything. And you even have Ukraine that makes its necessary cameo appearance in any allegation of criminality or money laundering. So the short version of what took place is that this is the second largest crypto exchange for a lot of non-Bitcoin, often not even Bitcoin. It's more these other digital coins, some called stable coins, some called altcoins in the blockchain-derived space. And this guy was he's the son of a prominent tax lawyer, tax law professor at Stanford. His mom is also a Stanford law professor. His aunt is on the World Economic Forum and is one of the leading public health people in the world.
And just to stop you there, when you say on, we're not talking featured on the website, actively involved in policy at the WEF.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. One of the people they promoted more than anyone over the last half decade.
Mm-hmm.
This is a guy who graduates from MIT, goes and becomes a quant. That's a derivatives analytics, data-driven trader at a small boutique firm. And then a few years later, pops up on the crypto space. And suddenly he's getting big investors and big investments. He's making all kinds of money. Supposedly he's doing it arbitraging Bitcoin between the United States and Japan and other places. But when people have tried to find out what his original source for all his money was, it's always been vague and obscure. This is a case where Theranos meets Jeffrey Epstein in many aspects, as others have commented upon, even to the point of sex scandals and the like. Sex scandals, Caribbean islands, you have all of that dynamic, allegations of blackmail and extortion lurking in the backstory as well. Even some suspicious suicides of whether a particular crypto individual was talking about this man. So Samuel Bankman-Fried, SBF as he's more popularly known, pops up on the scene in 2019, forming FTX, a crypto exchange, the goal being and offering things that some people at the time said seem a little suspicious. The goal was to get one of the great famous crypto frauds was actually a Canadian years ago. It appears that this guy just replicated a lot of what he did. How do you get other people's money? Well, you promise them things that sound too good to be true. So he was promising 8% rates of return that didn't quite make sense. Just deposit your crypto here and you'll get a great rate of return, and will help you leverage so that you can bet on other cryptos at 3x up to 10x levels. And a lot of people were, certain people were skeptical, but not Silicon Valley. not the Democratic Party political establishment, not the folks at the SEC or the CFTC, because this kid was wired and everybody connected to him was wired. They were MIT connected, SEC connected, CFTC connected, Biden administration connected, Silicon Valley connected. His father's a high-end tax lawyer, law professor, also clinical psychologist, reads like a Mark Robert novel in that aspect. And this guy sets up a very complex set of entities that look like Daddy had some help. Going from Hong Kong to the Caymans to the U.S. in ways that a lot of people found too Byzantine to even figure out exactly what was connected to what. The CNBC promotes him. Jim Cramer calls him the next J.P. Morgan.
We're going to get into that, and when we get into Kevin O'Leary, as to the people promoting them and whether or not they took cuts for promoting them. We know that Kevin O'Leary was a paid ambassador, a paid sponsor, and an investor. Sorry, I just wanted to pause that, and we'll get back to that in a bit.
And within the Bitcoin, or I should say crypto space, though all crypto sort of originally sort of triggered by Bitcoin, it's expanded into all these other altcoins and stable coins and so forth, and other methods and means of using blockchain, with a lot of controversy about how much of this is legit versus how much of it is a scam. The way SBF himself described his business practice led a couple of podcasters about a year ago to laugh and say, "You're describing a Ponzi scheme." Because he's like, "Oh, what you do is you create a box, and this box you say is going to change the world. It's a world-changing box. And you get a bunch of people to believe it's going to be a world-changing box. And the number one reason why they invest is they just think it will keep going up and up and up and up. Even if it's in fact not a world-changing box, it's just a box." And that he is in the process of facilitating, enabling that to occur. And he's like, "Who are you to say the box doesn't have value? If people say it has value, doesn't that give it value?" That was as a response and reaction to people. So there was actually a YouTuber who 6 months ago said, "This looks like a Ponzi scheme, what this guy's describing." But nobody in the media covered it. Once again, like Theranos, like Madoff, both deep, deep, deep ties to the Democratic Party. They instead, all it was praise, 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 praise. He was described as a leader of effective altruism. He was going to spend all this money because he's particularly pandemic focused, interestingly enough. He and so much so that the CFTC took photos with him. The SEC commissioners were promoting him. And in fact, what this reflects a deeper split in the Bitcoin space. You have on the one hand the decentralized, open source Bitcoin originalist. These are people who believe in Bitcoin because it's decentralized, because it's open source, so that there's more transparency to contest the corrupting influence of centralized bank currencies. On the other hand, you have people who are trying to emulate the centralized bank currencies, creating and they loosely call the decentralized DeFi. The centralized folks who they want regulation to wipe out their decentralized competitors. And this guy was the lead on more regulation. That's why it's deeply ironic that his fraud is now going to be used as an excuse to do what he wanted to have happen, which was regulate his competitors. But he starts pouring in massive amounts of money to the Democratic Party, second only to George Soros in the history of individual contributions to a political party in the modern era. You're talking about tens and tens and tens of millions of dollars, and that's just what can be directly tied to him. Politico had a whole piece on him a couple of months ago about how massively influential he was. He only made donations to a few small Republicans, names like Mitt Romney, names like Ben Sass, that might lead you to question, exactly who those people are. But that's where he was going. So 40 million plus at least to the Democratic Party. But because he was funneling money in so many other places, it's anticipated. Like, for example, his mom runs an organization that's one of the biggest Democratic get out the vote organizations. The anomalies we saw in this past election, he was one of the key funders of. But then it gets even more extraordinary.
Actually, before you get there, key funders of a get out to vote, does that count as a campaign contribution, or is that's just philanthropic, not a donation?
That's where all his philanthropy was going.
Mm-hmm.
It was there or towards pandemic work. lockdown stuff, things of that nature. The next great pandemic, had to really worry about that. So but it gets even worse in terms of money issues, because money went to U.S. government, has been giving billions and billions and billions to Ukraine. Well, it turns out, as Jim Hoft has detailed and others have detailed, at the Gateway Pundit and other places, some of this money was actually being recycled. So it went to Ukraine, then Ukraine put money into FTX, and then FTX turned around and gave money to Democrats. In other words, it appears the Biden administration was illegally funding the Democratic get out the vote operation and Democratic campaigns disguised as Ukrainian war support and Ukrainian financial aid is the rest. So that's all the different places this can go. The part of the story may or may not be connected to an unusual death in the Caribbean, Puerto Rico. One of the crypto guys, one of the lead crypto folks, put out a weird tweet that said that he was being targeted by intelligence services because he stumbled into this scandal in the crypto space that concerned sexual scandal, Epstein-style sexual scandal, etc. A day or two later, they find him dead on the beach in Puerto Rico. Apparently, the official narrative is going to be he went out and drowned himself, which is an interesting thing. One of this guy's icons was a guy who was also one of the great crypto guys. And a lot of people in the crypto space are Julian Assange-ish. They're people who are against the system, who think centralized banks and corrupting institutions of government rely upon centralized banks and manipulation of currencies to control populations. And their reason to be in the space is not just financial, but is often primarily philosophical. And for them, they're fighting the system. And one of this guy's icons several years ago died in an odd train accident. The official narrative was kind of like the Gary Webb, he shot himself twice in the head narrative. They claimed suicide. They claimed he committed suicide by walking in front of a train. So apparently that's what happens in this crypto space. You say, hey, I think the government's out to get me, and then you commit suicide in the weirdest ways anybody's ever heard, like walking in front of a train or drowning yourself in a rough ocean. A couple of brutal ways to die. So, but not long after that, guy died in the Caribbean. A few weeks later, a story leaks, and the story shows that there's deep overlapping connections between FTX and the trading business that was supposed to be a separate business, and that basically the money on the books is all their own printed money. He's pretending to be a bank. And the guy's name is Bankman. So, it's part of his name, So the Bankman-Fried, one of those two, you can't trust people with two last names. Just saying. That's just a general rule. Word of the wise. But and as to those people who died, remember eternal truth number 2, Epstein didn't kill himself. It might be applicable in both of those contexts. But basically, it turned out he didn't have as much assets as they said, and what the assets were commingled between the two businesses. And not only that, the assets are their own assets. It's like they're printing their own money and claiming, it's worth X, and boom, like his little box analogy. So that triggered a lot of concern because a lot of people had their money in it. And he's got a bunch of money. He's as part of Robinhood. He tried to buy part of Twitter with Elon Musk. Elon Musk thought, this dude's a little weird. That's Elon Musk saying somebody's weird. But he was like, something's off with this guy. No go. But he has money in all kinds of other aspects of the crypto space. He was trying to get regulation imposed so the government could take over it and greenlight the path for central bank digital currencies as the practical alternative to Bitcoin and everything else, as to how they're going to pitch it and portray it. And it turns out he's got major money issues with all these businesses. So Binance comes in and says, we're going to dump Binance's main competitor comes in and says, well, we're going to dump what we hold in this because we don't trust what's going on. And all of a sudden there starts to be a bank run, so to speak, on this sort of fake token, this box of no real value. And they sort of try to put a halt to it by saying, hey, we'll buy it back at 22, which lets everybody know what their margin call is, because what they've been doing is using this as an asset to borrow money from other people. The worst part that came out a day or two later was that he had been borrowing customer deposits to put into his risky trades in the other business. So as all of this unfolds, he initially comes out and says, no problem, we'll get it fixed, just a liquidity issue. Turns out, of course, not a liquidity issue. Turns out it's an asset bankruptcy issue. A day after he said, no worries, no problems, he files for bankruptcy for all the entities. Not only that, another story comes out about how weird the whole getup is. Basically, he and all the executives are living together in a house where they're all sleeping with each other, and other kind of weird behavior appears to be going on. Allegations of blackmail, allegations of extortion, allegations of death threats, all kinds of weird stuff that sounds just like what this guy warned about a month ago that died under weird circumstances in the Caribbean. That was also in the crypto space. So then all of a sudden, all the panic hits and they put a freeze on everything. Everybody's worried about what this all means. And at that time, they say, don't worry, it's bankruptcy. Everything's going to be frozen. All of a sudden, money starts disappearing from FTX accounts. In fact, it looks like over $1 billion. They come out and they say they've been hacked. They somehow magically were hacked at the same time SBF stepped down. So the concern is that SBF is grabbing all the money, or somebody connected to him is, and he's running off. He was supposedly in the Bahamas. One story is that he's been loosely detained in the Bahamas. Another story is that his plane was tracked going from there to Argentina. Another story is that he and a bunch of the executives were trying to flee to Dubai because of the no extradition treaty. Now, what I will say about all of those things is people have a misunderstanding about extradition. Just because there's no extradition treaty doesn't mean you don't end up back in U.S. custody. There's 3 ways that U.S. courts have greenlit. First of all, U.S. courts have said courts can obtain personal jurisdiction over someone if the person is kidnapped by the government or kidnapped by private agents. Doesn't matter. Goes back to a Pinkerton's case, I think maybe even in Argentina or somewhere in Latin America from the late 19th century, where they said if a court obtains jurisdiction over you through kidnapping, no problem. The second is, the extradition law is that if they obtain personal jurisdiction through an extradition treaty, they have to comply with the extradition treaty and the terms of the extradition order. But they often find ways to weasel out of that too. That's an issue for Julian Assange, a risk for Julian Assange. But the second problem is you can just be kidnapped. The third problem is you can just get deported to the border. And the way they do this is they deport you to a plane where U.S. Marshals are waiting. Now, legally, those are the U.S. Marshals kidnapping you. Until they're in the U.S. custody, you could legally defend yourself against them, but almost nobody knows that or realizes that. And U.S. Marshals aren't eager to tell people that. So just going to a place that doesn't have extradition is no guarantee whatsoever that you don't end up back in United States criminal custody. But that is where this case is. The question is, will the media, will Congress, will some smart prosecutor dig deeper to find out the degree of Democratic ties to this, or will the corrupt politicians use this as their excuse to grab even more power when the problem is concentrated power to begin with?
It's interesting. It makes sense of some of the talking points I've heard, which are now he donated to both parties. He just donated nearly 40 million to one and however much to the other.
About 10 grand to the other.
And I know that you're going to probably cover this in a hush hush, but the idea that if this were Elroy, what's the
James
the
Elroy.
guy, if this were a James Elroy novel, who would stand to benefit from this being a false flag or a setup to be the instigation for regulation of Bitcoin digital currencies that the government has been clamoring for a long time? How does this even get set up in the first place? Okay, fine. He starts an exchange. Regulated or unregulated, I presume it's not that easy to just start up an exchange and get people trading millions or whatever. However, I don't know what the value of the exchange was. It's not something that sets up overnight that you can do just because it's unregulated, or am I just being totally naive when it comes to cryptocurrency?
No, I mean, the reason why he was able to do it, he had a lot of regulated entities. His problem wasn't regulation at all. His problem was recommending regulating his competitors unnecessarily. That would give businesses like his an advantage, which clearly should not be the case. As a general rule, bad idea to have your Bitcoin on an exchange. Just FYI. People, Mark Moss, others that we've interviewed in the Bitcoin space have repeatedly said, George Gammon, don't have your Bitcoin on a Bitcoin exchange. Just don't do it. Have it on a cold wallet, ideally. But putting that aside, I mean, he had billions of dollars, money sitting in that exchange. And the real reason it was sitting there was because he was promising the ability to leverage it. He was promising the ability, the guarantee of at least a minimal rate of return on it. Things that should have been red flags to people from day one. But the reason they weren't was because he's talking to the CFTC head. He's talking to high-ranking SEC people. CNBC is promoting him. Bloomberg is promoting him. Leading Silicon Valley companies are promoting him. That's why I say it's a lot like Theranos. So it's a case of Theranos meets Jeffrey Epstein, you get FTX. And then you get the political corruption that was also critical, essential to it. But from who benefits, right now it's going to be those people. They not only got to launder Ukrainian aid back to help Democrats, they got massive amounts of money for Democrats that was critical to them holding so many closely contested Senate races and House races and even governor's races in the country. And now they get to use his fall to get more control and more power. So the people at the CFTC, at the SEC, and in the Biden administration, and some folks in Silicon Valley and their allies, those are the ones who really profited here and will continue to, by the way this is playing out.
And I'll just give Kevin O'Leary a bit of a hard time because his interview was one of the pieces that I listened to this afternoon to try to make sense of this. He lost his investment in FTX. Maybe. FTX and Kevin O'Leary announced long-term investment in spokesperson relationship. Relationship is a remunerated relationship. This is from last year. Long-term relationship centers around equity investment and an ambassador deal to be paid in crypto. And then just to eliminate all doubts, it says Kevin O'Leary will be taking an equity stake in both FTX trading, yada, 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 along with being paid in crypto to serve as an ambassador and spokesperson to the company. And he comes out now and says, oh, I made a bad investment too. I'll learn from my mistakes. I'd like to know what the wash was between the paid in crypto for the ambassadorship and being a spokesperson and what he lost on the company. And I'd also like to know what his knowledge was going back. If you're investing in the company, you're going to ask for spreadsheets. You're going to ask for balance sheets. You're going to ask for a lot of financial information before investing however much he invested. I'm a noob. I can understand the idea of saying I'm issuing tokens, which I'm evaluating at X, and I'm selling them to a third party that happens to be a related entity, a commingled my own entity, so that I can say, well, look, I sold it to Mr. X for $1 billion, so the company must be worth $10 billion because I got 9 more of these boxes. And then you find out that company is indirectly or directly owned by the same individual. I could figure that out. I'm an idiot. Kevin O'Leary is either a bigger idiot than me, or he's not as much of an idiot as he says he is now to have lost his investment. Amazing. Well, where does it go for the time being? Not to give anybody any investment advice, but I
think they have to. I think they have to indict him and everybody connected to him. Is part one. That's a misnomer. The Ukrainian aid doesn't benefit disproportionately red states. I get that's where people think the military industry is. You might want to take a new look at that. But putting that aside, they have to indict him, I think. And I think they have to indict a bunch of high-ranking people next to him. And I think they have, in order just to put, they can't probably have him out and about. If he gets out and about, that will be a little odd. If they don't indict. His security while in custody will be mighty interesting. I mean, the issue is he's made public statements that led people to believe things that were clearly not true. And specifically FTX said they would never use customer deposits. In a way, it's quite apparent they did. And so covering apparently his own losses. This guy was not some special genius at all. He was just a scam artist, is what it all evidence points to. But they will try to use this for sure to push through legislation that had originally stalled now to try to control all of the crypto space as much as possible. And so that's almost a guarantee to have happen now. It may happen in the lame duck Congress. It may happen in the new Congress. I don't think they'll take the gamble that they wait for the new Congress. I think it will pass in the lame duck Congress. And they'll use the pretext of this case. And then the question is, if it's a meaningful investigation, they'll implicate a lot of people. How do they cabinet? And I'm sure Biden Justice Department will definitely make sure to cabinet. Or maybe they just let him escape, or just go slow on indicting him. Something like that.
he is abroad. They have to find him. They have to indict him. They have to.
Reportedly, he's under Bahamian custody. That he's not allowed to leave the island. But people said they saw people tracked a plane tied to him that left yesterday. So it's unclear what the real status is.
A lot of people predicting an Epstein, Robert. We're going to see. I mean, there is a shirt that says Epstein didn't kill himself. Like, that wouldn't be the first time anyone would make merch with that. I'm trying to think. SBF. Robert, we're going to bring it over to Rumble. I did notice there might be something wrong with the number watching on Rumble, but I don't care about that except to say, is anybody having problems watching on Rumble? Because it's going to be the segue into the election chicanery that is afoot, to quote a Stewie. So, buddy, mosey on over to Rumble. Oh, my internet looks like it's going to be slow again in a second. Mosey on over to Rumble. The link is pinned, and we're going to talk Carrie Lake. The what is it called? The post-mortem of the election, now that we know a little bit more, although they're still counting. And there's nothing abnormal about that, people. You're the conspiracy theorists if you think that that's not right. Head over to Rumble. I'm going to wind it down here and see you there in 3, 2,